In the quiet of a frost-kissed morning in Minneapolis, where the Mississippi River glittered like a ribbon of hope under the pale winter sun, a young woman stood before a cracked mirror in a cramped apartment. Her name was Clara Monroe, and her reflection told a story of resilience etched into every line of her face. Her hazel eyes, though weary, burned with a fire that refused to dim. Today was the day she had been dreaming of, dreading, and preparing for. A job interview at Horizon Innovations, one of the most prestigious tech firms in the Midwest. But as she adjusted the frayed collar of her secondhand blazer, a whisper of doubt crept into her heart. Would they see her for who she was, or would they only see the worn-out shoes and the nervous tremble in her hands? Clara's life had never been easy. Born to a single mother in a small town in northern Minnesota, she grew up in a world where dreams were luxuries and survival was the only currency. Her mother, Ellen, worked two jobs, cleaning houses by day and waitressing at a diner by night, just to keep food on the table. Clara learned early that love could be fierce, but not always enough to shield you from the cold realities of poverty. School was her sanctuary, a place where her mind could soar beyond the confines of their one-bedroom trailer. She devoured books on coding, taught herself Python from outdated library computers, and dreamed of building something that could change the world. But dreams, she learned, came with a price. When Clara was 16, Ellen fell ill with a chronic lung condition, the kind that drains savings and hope in equal measure. Clara took on part-time jobs, grocery clerk, tutor, even shoveling snow in the brutal winters, to help cover medical bills. College seemed like a distant star, beautiful but unreachable. Yet through sheer grit, she earned a scholarship to a small community college, majoring in computer science. She graduated top of her class, but the world beyond the classroom was unkind. Tech jobs in Minneapolis were competitive, and Clara's resume, lacking the polish of Ivy League degrees or flashy internships, often landed in the trash. Still, she persisted, applying to every opening, her hope a fragile thread that refused to snap. Now at 25, Clara stood at a crossroads. Horizon Innovations was her chance, her shot at breaking free from the cycle of struggle. The job was for a junior software developer, a role that promised not just a paycheck, but a chance to create, to innovate, to prove she belonged. She had spent weeks preparing, coding late into the night, building a portfolio that showcased her talent. Her laptop, an old refurbished model she'd saved for over a year, was her lifeline, her weapon, her voice. But as she stepped into the icy morning, clutching that laptop like a shield, she couldn't shake the fear that it wouldn't be enough. The Horizon Innovations building loomed ahead, a sleek tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the sky. Clara's breath caught as she entered the lobby, her worn sneakers squeaking on the polished marble floor. The receptionist, a young man with a crisp suit and a skeptical glance, looked her up and down. "Name?" he asked, his tone clipped. "Clara Monroe," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. He handed her a visitor badge and pointed to the elevator. "8th floor. Don't be late." The elevator ride felt like an eternity. Clara's reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman who didn't belong. Her blazer too big, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup because she couldn't afford it. But her eyes, those hazel eyes, held a spark that no one could take away. When the doors opened, she stepped into a conference room where 3 interviewers sat at a long table, their faces a mix of curiosity and amusement. There was Dr. Helen Carter, the lead engineer, a woman with sharp features and a reputation for brilliance. Mark Ellison, the HR manager, whose smile didn't reach his eyes, and Ethan Price, a senior developer with a smirk that made Clara's skin prickle. As she walked in, Ethan chuckled softly, whispering something to Mark that made him stifle a laugh. Clara's cheeks burned, but she squared her shoulders and took her seat. Ms. Monroe, Helen began, her voice cool but professional, tell us why you're here. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but Ethan cut in, his tone dripping with condescension. No offense, but you don't exactly scream tech prodigy. Where did you even get that blazer? The room went silent, the air heavy with judgment. Clara's heart pounded, but she forced a smile. I'm here because I can code better than anyone you've interviewed today, she said, her voice steady. And if you give me a chance, I'll prove it. The interviewers exchanged glances and Ethan's smirk widened. All right then, he said. Show us what you've got. Open that laptop of yours. Clara's fingers trembled as she opened her laptop, the hinges creaking faintly under the weight of the moment. The screen flickered to life, revealing a desktop cluttered with code files and a single photo of her mother, smiling despite the oxygen tube in her nose. The room's silence was suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and Ethan's barely concealed snicker. Clara took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was it. The moment she had poured her heart into. The moment that could change everything or leave her broken. Let's start with a coding challenge, Helen said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table. It was a complex problem. Design an algorithm to optimize a logistics system for real-time delivery tracking, a core component of Horizon software. Clara's heart sank. This wasn't just a test of coding skills. It was a test of creativity, efficiency, and nerve. She had 30 minutes to write the code, explain her approach, and run it on her laptop. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, clearly expecting her to falter. Mark glanced at his watch, already looking bored. Only Helen's eyes held a flicker of curiosity, a challenge to prove them wrong. Clara's fingers flew across the keyboard, her mind a whirlwind of logic and instinct. She broke the problem into parts, sketching out a solution that combined graph theory with real-time data processing. Her code was clean, elegant, and innovative, drawing on techniques she'd taught herself from open-source projects and late-night tutorials. As she typed, she felt the weight of their stares, the unspoken doubts hanging in the air. She overheard Ethan whisper to Mark, "Bet she crashes that ancient machine before she finishes." Clara's jaw tightened, but she kept going, her focus unbreakable. When the 30 minutes were up, Clara turned her laptop to face the interviewers. "I've built a prototype," she said, her voice steady. "It's a scalable algorithm that reduces delivery tracking latency by 40% compared to standard models. I can walk you through the code and run a simulation." Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but Helen nodded. "Go ahead," she said. Clara launched the simulation, her screen displaying a sleek interface that mapped delivery routes in real time, adjusting dynamically to traffic and weather data. The room was silent as the program ran flawlessly, the results exceeding the problem's requirements. Helen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the code. "This is impressive," she said, her tone softening. "You accounted for edge cases most candidates miss. How did you learn this?" Clara hesitated, then spoke from the heart. "I taught myself. I didn't have the resources for fancy boot camps or internships, but I had libraries, online forums, and a lot of late nights. Coding is my way of building a better future, for me and my mom." The vulnerability in her voice caught them off guard, and for a moment, even Ethan's smirk faltered. But the moment of grace was short-lived. Ethan leaned forward, his tone sharp. "That's a nice story, but let's be real. Your resume shows no major projects, no big-name companies. How do we know you can handle the pressure of a real tech environment?" This isn't a charity, Clara's heart clenched, but she met his gaze. "I've been handling pressure my whole life," she said. "I've balanced jobs, school, and taking care of my mom while teaching myself to code. If that's not pressure, I don't know what is." The interview continued with more technical questions, each one a hurdle designed to trip her up. Clara answered with precision, drawing on her self-taught knowledge and quick thinking. But the atmosphere grew tense. Ethan's questions became increasingly aggressive, probing not just her skills but her background, her lack of connections, her fit for Horizon's culture. Mark, meanwhile, seemed distracted, checking his phone under the table. Only Helen remained engaged, her expression unreadable but attentive. As the interview neared its end, Helen asked Clara to present her portfolio, a collection of personal projects she'd built over the years. Clara hesitated, knowing her work wasn't polished like those of candidates with access to cutting-edge tools. But she opened her laptop again, showing a mobile app she'd developed to help low-income families track affordable healthcare options. "I built this for my community," she said. "It's not perfect, but it's helped people like my mom find clinics they can afford." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Helen nodded slowly, but Ethan scoffed. "That's cute, but we're not running a nonprofit here. We need developers who can deliver for clients, not hobbyists with sob stories." Clara's hands clenched into fists under the table, but she refused to let his words break her. She thanked them for their time, packed up her laptop, and left the room, her heart heavy, but her resolve intact. As she rode the elevator down, tears stung her eyes. She had given everything. In that conference room echoed in her mind, a reminder of every door that had been slammed in her face. Yet deep within, a spark of defiance burned. She wasn't done fighting, not yet. The days after the interview blurred into a haze of waiting and worry. Clara checked her email obsessively, her heart leaping at every notification, only to sink when it was just spam or a bill reminder. Horizon Innovations hadn't called, and the silence was louder than Ethan's laughter. She returned to her part-time job at a local coffee shop, pouring lattes and forcing smiles while her mind replayed every moment of the interview. Had she been too bold? Too honest? Had her laptop, with its cracked case and sluggish processor, betrayed her? The weight of uncertainty pressed down, threatening to smother the hope she'd clung to for so long. One chilly afternoon, as Clara wiped down tables during a slow shift, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Her heart raced as she answered. "Clara Monroe?" a woman's voice asked, crisp and professional. "This is Helen Carter from Horizon Innovations. Can you come in tomorrow morning? We'd like to discuss your interview." Clara's breath caught, her mind spinning. Was this a rejection in person? A second chance? She agreed, her voice trembling with cautious hope, and hung up, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped a tray of mugs. That night, Clara barely slept. She sat at her small kitchen table, her laptop open, reviewing her portfolio and practicing responses to every possible question. Ellen, sensing her daughter's anxiety, wheeled over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've got this, Clara," she said. "You're stronger than you know. Whatever happens, you've already made me proud." Clara hugged her mother tightly, drawing strength from her words, but the fear lingered. What if this was just another door closing? The next morning, Clara returned to Horizon's gleaming tower, her heart pounding as she stepped into the same conference room. This time only Helen was there, seated at the table with a laptop and a stack of papers. Her expression was serious but not unkind. "Thank you for coming, Clara," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I'll get straight to the point. Your interview was unconventional, but your code, your approach, it stood out. I've reviewed your portfolio in detail, and I have a proposition for you." Clara's pulse quickened, but before she could respond, Helen slid a tablet across the table. On it was a detailed analysis of Clara's algorithm from the interview, annotated with notes praising its efficiency and creativity. "This is some of the best work I've seen from a junior candidate," Helen said. "But there's a problem. Ethan and Mark aren't convinced you're a cultural fit. They think you lack the polish and experience we typically look for." Clara's stomach dropped. the familiar sting of rejection rising. But Helen raised a hand, her eyes intense. I disagree with them, and I'm willing to fight for you, but there's a catch. Here came the twist that would change everything. Helen leaned forward, her voice low. Horizon is developing a new project, a community-driven platform to connect underserved populations with resources, healthcare, education, job training. It's a passion project of mine, but it's struggling. Our team is brilliant, but they're out of touch with the people this platform is meant to serve. I think you could be the key to making it work. I'm offering you a trial role, not the junior developer position, but a special consultant position on this project. You'd report directly to me, and you'd have 3 months to prove you belong here. If you succeed, you're in. If not, you're out. Clara's mind reeled. This wasn't the job she'd applied for. It was bigger, riskier, and far more personal. The platform Helen described was exactly the kind of work Clara had dreamed of, a chance to use her skills to help people like her mother, her neighbors, her community. But the stakes were enormous. A trial role meant no stability, no guarantee of a future at Horizon. And working under Helen's scrutiny, against the skepticism of Ethan and others, would be a battle. Yet as she looked into Helen's eyes, she saw something rare. Belief. Not pity, not charity, but genuine belief in her potential. I'll do it, Clara said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. Helen nodded, a small smile breaking through her stern demeanor. Good. You start Monday. But Clara, this won't be easy. You'll need to bring everything you've got, and more. As Clara left the building, her heart was a mix of terror and exhilaration. This was her chance, but it was also a tightrope over a chasm of doubt. The next 3 months were a grueling test of Clara's resilience. She threw herself into the project, working long hours to design features that made the platform intuitive for users who weren't tech-savvy. She drew on her own experiences, hours spent navigating confusing healthcare websites, scraping together funds for her mother's treatments, to create a system that was simple, accessible, and human. But the workplace was a minefield. Ethan, though not her direct supervisor, made his disapproval clear, dismissing her ideas in meetings and questioning her credentials. Other developers, wary of her unconventional background, kept their distance. Clara felt like an outsider, her every move scrutinized. Yet there were glimmers of hope. Helen became an unexpected ally, mentoring Clara with tough but fair feedback. And one colleague, a quiet programmer named Javier, began to warm to her, impressed by her work ethic and creativity. Together they tackled bugs and brainstormed solutions, forming a tentative friendship that gave Clara strength. Still, the pressure was relentless. Clara's days were a blur of coding, meetings, and late-night calls with her mother, whose health was worsening. The fear of failure loomed large. What if she couldn't prove herself? What if she let her mother down? As the trial period neared its end, Clara prepared for the platform's beta launch, a make-or-break moment. She poured her heart into a feature that allowed users to connect directly with local nonprofits, a tool she knew could change lives. The night before the launch, she sat in her apartment, her laptop glowing, and whispered a promise to herself. No matter what happens, I won't give up. Little did she know, the launch would bring a revelation that would shake Horizon, and her place in it, to its core. The morning of the beta launch dawned gray and cold, the Minneapolis skyline shrouded in mist. Clara arrived at Horizon Innovations early, her laptop under her arm, her nerves a tangled knot. The conference room was packed, not just with the project team, but with senior executives, investors, and community partners. Helen had warned her that this was more than a test of the platform, it was a test of her. If the launch succeeded, it could secure her a permanent role. If it failed, her time at Horizon would end, and with it, her dreams of breaking into the tech world. As the presentation began, Clara stood at the front of the room, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye on her. She walked them through the platform, demonstrating its features with a quiet confidence that belied her fear. The interface was sleek yet accessible, designed for people like her mother, those who needed help but were often overwhelmed by technology. The room was silent as she showcased the nonprofit connector, a feature that had been her brainchild. When she clicked to run a live demo, connecting a hypothetical user to a local clinic, the screen lit up with a seamless, real-time match. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. But then, disaster struck. Mid-demo, the platform crashed. The screen froze, a red error message glaring like a wound. Clara's heart stopped as whispers filled the room. Ethan, seated near the front, smirked openly, leaning toward a colleague to mutter something that made them chuckle. Clara's face burned, but she refused to crumble. "Give me a moment," she said, her voice calm. She opened her laptop, diving into the code while the room watched. Her fingers flew, tracing the bug to a faulty API integration she'd warned the team about weeks ago. A warning Ethan had dismissed. Within minutes, she patched the code, restarted the demo, and the platform sprang back to life, smoother than before. The room erupted in applause, but Clara barely heard it. Her focus was on Helen, who gave her a nod of quiet pride. The launch continued, and by the end, the community partners were buzzing with excitement, already planning to roll out the platform in local shelters and clinics. One executive, a woman with a kind smile, approached Clara afterward. "You've got something special," she said. "This platform could change lives." Clara's chest swelled, but the victory felt incomplete. She knew Ethan and others still doubted her, and the trial period wasn't over yet. That afternoon, Helen called Clara into her office. "The launch was a success," she said, "but there's something you need to know." She handed Clara a folder containing internal emails, correspondence between Ethan and a rival developer who had been pushing to take over the project. The emails revealed a deliberate attempt to undermine Clara, including instructions to ignore her warnings about the API bug. "Ethan thought you'd fail," Helen said. "He didn't count on your resilience or your talent. I'm recommending you for a permanent role, Clara. You've earned it." Clara's eyes filled with tears, not just for the job, but for the validation she'd craved her whole life. She returned home that evening, the weight of the folder in her bag a reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. Ellen was waiting, her face bright with hope. When Clara shared the news, her mother pulled her into a frail embrace. "I knew you could do it," Ellen whispered. "You've always been my fighter." In the weeks that followed, Clara's role at Horizon became permanent, and the platform she'd helped build began to transform lives across Minneapolis. Families found health care, students accessed free tutoring, and job seekers connected with training programs. Clara's story spread, first within Horizon, then in the local news. She became a symbol of what was possible when talent and grit were given a chance, inspiring others in her community to pursue their dreams despite the odds. The happy ending wasn't just Clara's. It was a call to action for a society too quick to judge based on appearances or pedigrees. Her journey showed that resilience could outshine doubt, that a single laptop could open doors, and that every underdog deserved a shot. At a company event months later, Clara stood before her colleagues, no longer the nervous outsider, but a confident developer with a vision. "We all have stories," she said, her voice strong. "Some are loud, some are quiet, but they all matter. Let's build a world where everyone gets a chance to tell theirs." For the USA audience, Clara's story carried a powerful message. In a nation built on opportunity, the American dream thrives when we lift up those who fight against the odds. Her triumph was a reminder that courage, humanity, and perseverance could bridge divides, challenge biases, and create a future where no one is laughed out of the room for daring to dream. Now this story comes to an end,